Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. Dom, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
Mate, I am all the better for that intro music. That is your midlife crisis summed up in a few beats. I love it.
It is. It really, really is. I was chatting to a few people and I was asking, like, does this theme music still work? Because it's people putting hands together. And I was like, no, it does. It's celebrating the guest for coming on. So yeah welcome. Welcome.
Right, yeah, it's a music career you never quite got to, but you still might. It's like my football career. I still think there's a chance I'm going to get picked for England, but it's just not happened just yet.
Time. Give it time, Dom. Give it time. So, Dom, we've been speaking on LinkedIn for many years. Yeah. I was looking back on the LinkedIn. It was like back and forth for a while. But I guess before we get into kind of who Dom is and what you're all about, I asked my guests to kind of come up with a log line, a summary, a sentence, what summarizes them. What would yours be?
Wannabe comedian suffering in business world.
Wannabe comedian suffering in business world.
Just the rationale is if there's ever a chance for a joke, I make it and then afterwards think, shit, that wasn't the right scenario. Because I have to remind myself that I'm normally operating in a business context. But I see the opportunity for a bit of banter and I jump in and I'm like, I'm not at a dinner party or getting drunk with my mates. This is a paid job and I should maybe take life a little bit more seriously. I've got away with it so far, but maybe one day I won't.
I don't know though. Like for me, I think about it and I go, actually, that's the thing. What makes us human, right?
The playfulness.
Yeah, playfulness. And we're going needling on that, I think, for sure. But I guess, Dom, for people who haven't kind of come across you, maybe give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who you are and where you are right now.
Easy. So for those that listen to the podcast, I am Danny's brother from a different mother. So a fellow Manc. I decided the wonderful 2003 when the Rugby World Cup was hitting its epicenter to go, you know what? I'm not going to live in the UK anymore. I'm going to try living in Australia for 18 months. It was a random decision. There was never a plan. I was going to do 18 months in Australia and then move back to the UK. The plan was that I arrived with long hair, really fit, surfer. None of those three things have happened. Failed miserably, completely at all three. But I arrived in Australia. I'm like, I had never had any desires to come and live in Australia. I'm like, I kind of like it, like beach lifestyle, the climate, the food, like just everything about it just started to resonate. And so it's been 20 years now that I've sort of lived and worked and enjoyed Australia. And so now I'm in this weird mode, right? I'm not from anywhere. Because when I'm back home in Manchester, people are like, oh, you sound Australian. I'm like, no one in Australia will ever say that. And so here I'm the English guy. And back in the UK, I'm the Aussie guy. And after 20 years, I'm kind of from neither. But I spent the last 10 years kind of living my best life, mate. And it's been a weird one. I never thought that careers were things you could enjoy. I think growing up in the north of England, I just assumed that a career was something that you suffered through. And the only enjoyment was whinging about it on a Friday night over your fish and chips and just dreading going in on Monday. And then 10 years ago, started working for an organization and I'm like, damn, this is messed up. Like I like it and it's fun and I can add value. So I now have the best made up job in the world. I'm a work futurist. So I spend my time not with a crystal ball. I've got over that bit. My time trying to understand what the future of work might look like. So I can help organizations and leaders today plant the seed they need to plant to build that future. So it's kind of a futurist role, but kind of like you do, mate, very much in the now, right? It's not navel gazing. It's what are the things we can do today to create that future rather than guessing what the future might look like.
Nice. And we're definitely going to geek out on that a little bit later on. But I want to take you right back to your childhood. Cue the dream sequence. If I was to ask your teacher in school, what's Dom going to be when he grows up? What do you think they would have said? I
mean, there were two answers that were regularly shared around. One was pain in the arse, which I still am. that is for certain. And what I kept on getting was class clown. And it's funny how if I think about the manifestation of class clown, I'm the same thing now, but with an education and a little bit more self-awareness. But if I think about my role, which is storytelling, inspiring others, performing, agitating, facilitating, trying to get under people's skin to get them feeling just a little bit uncomfortable to try and get them to learn a new skill. It's all the things I did that got called class clown. And so it's been a reminder for me. I've got two young twin boys, right? They're 14 months old. And harking back to my childhood, which I've done a lot since they arrived, has been this trigger of going, it's fascinating what the world or society called that, and how it wasn't diminished, but it wasn't valued. It wasn't, you can make a career out of this. And I'm doing the exact same thing I used to do in high school and junior school, but now I'm being paid for it, and it's something that the world needs, right? So it's funny you said before that playfulness. I think at some point in the later stage of my education, people tried to beat that playfulness out of me, not physically, but mentally. And I kept just enough of the fire going and kind of went, sod it. This is my style. This is my MO. If the world doesn't want it, I'll find something else. But I can't not be authentic to who I am. And so that playfulness is just part of who I am. That class clown is now essentially a professional role, right? I'm not a performing clown. It's not dance, monkey, dance. But I need that energy, right? And that irreverence and the challenge and the humor and the seriousness, the provocation, right? All the parts of that theater come into what I do, but it was just, it was something that wasn't valued. And I get why. I'm sure I was a nightmare to educate as a kid.
So I guess it's fascinating this. So when I think about how I design, right? So like I talk about this actually in a book around playfulness, childlike versus childless.
Yeah.
And but I think when we have to come up with new solutions, new ideas, you need two kind of mindsets. You need this dreamer, this kind of childlike mindset to kind of just actually challenge what we think is the norms. But then it's fascinating as, you know, we bring people into the business and we go, we want to bring you in because you've got this creative mind and whatever else. And we go, but you've got to fit and you've got to conform within this box. How have you managed to kind of challenge that? Like, because that's a big task, right?
Yeah. So this will kind of confuse you. So I started out my career as a chartered accountant, right? It's not where you find many class clowns. So essentially, I know that we can be someone else for a period of time. So I had this trade-off I did with myself. I joined Deloitte as a chartered accountant, and I did 3 years in London, 5 years in Sydney with them, and I loved it because I learned a huge amount. But the moment I felt that learning sort of petering off, I'm like, this transaction doesn't work anymore because I don't thrive here. I can survive here. The thing that made it better than survival was this learning curve of different customers, different industries, working with smart people. And the minute that payoff started to level out, I'm like, I got to get out of here and go do something else, right? And so I've been very opportunistic in my career by going, what's the thing I'm going after in this chapter? And I use chapters on purpose. I'm like, I've got a chapter. What am I going after? So after my Deloitte phase, my chapter was I need life experience. I went and traveled the world for 18 months, right? Terrible for my career, but great for life experience. I'm like, that's my chapter. Then I'm like, well, what's my next chapter? I picked one of the customers that I had when I was at Deloitte. I was like, I want to go and work for them because this chapter is I want to follow through all the brilliant recommendations I came up with that I've never had to implement because it was so easy to write them because it wasn't my job to do them. I want to go and do them. And that's a chapter. And that was another 3 years. And then my next chapter was I want to find somewhere which is my home. So I had this sense that I'd been in houses, but I didn't have a home, right? I'd worked with smart people. I'd had some fun, but nowhere that felt like I could be truly me. And so as I started to look around, I had a great friend who was helping me at the time. And as I was trying to sort of get some career advice. And he's like, Dom, you're not looking for a job. You're looking for a place. Like, don't look on seek.com and look at job adverts for job titles because the title's probably irrelevant, but the place feels like it's really important. And so that's what I went looking for, right? And found somewhere that advertised it was that. Yeah, the company I work for has values like don't F the customer, right? Open company, no bullshit. Be the change you seek, play as a team, right? Build with heart and balance. And I remember looking at those values and going, they feel like my values. So maybe, just maybe there's a place out there where I can be me. Not that it's like bring your whole self to work stuff that people talk about. And I think that's BS, but like I can be authentically me, right? And maybe the elbows have to be chiseled sometimes because they get a bit sharp, but I can still be me. And it's weird for me that I arrived and felt that. And that 10 years on, I still feel that, even though the organization is completely different, right? Because once you get that comfort in your own skin, I find it a lot easier to morph and adapt because you suddenly feel comfortable in who you are. It's a lot easier to tweak around the edges versus I've worked in plenty of places where I played a role, right? It's exhausting, but I'm like, I have to be Mr. Serious or I have to be this. And that playfulness goes, I can do a job. I don't think I'm going to be any better than the next best person versus what you're talking about is when you've got that need for creativity, innovation, right, something that's not been done before, you need to give someone the space and the time and the freedom to do that, and the comfort that they're not going to be punished for it. And that's what me and you have seen too much of. It's like, no, you do you, but if anything goes wrong, we're going to punish you. And you're like, why did you hire me? Like, this feels like a weird game where I only ever lose.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come in, but ultimately, I'm not going to be the thing what you want me to be because it's too career risky. It's not worth it.
But you see it every day now, right? There's a lot of leaders I work with. We've had this job open for 9 months. We're trying to fire an A player. We've got to get the right candidate. And then they spend the first sort of 30, 60, 90 days indoctrinating them and saying, no, Danny, sorry, man, that's not the way things work here. And you're like, what did you hire them for? Like, just to gaslight them and diminish their latent value? Like, it's illogical, but I get why companies do it, because they don't know any other way, right? That one person, it's hard for them to be the disruptor. And what's significantly more likely is organ rejection.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me. I think when we think about it, we have, just listening to you and talk about kind of your kind of chapters, I think you can map a chapters through the masks you wear.
Yeah.
You could talk about, you was wearing this mask, but then you find a place where actually you don't need to wear any mask. Yeah. You are you.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to how long you stayed there and how long you've been there.
Yeah.
And
I think of it like relationships. Like, I've not hated anyone that I've dated, but I'm only going to marry one of them. Right? It's not that they were bad; they were great at the time, but then time moved on, and that chapter came to an end, and that person's off doing their thing, and I'm off doing mine, and there's no resentment for me there. That's just a chapter that ended, and so I think of it like with relationships, like how many masks you're wearing, and we see people every day wearing masks. You're like, damn, like that must be exhausting. Like, I'm not saying be unfiltered. I think there's a lot of people that I meet that think being your true, authentic self means you can have no filters and say whatever you want. It's not. You still need to be empathetic and considerate of others, but do so in a way that's uniquely you. And so each time I think you lose one of those masks, it takes a weight off and the shoulders come up. And the shoulders come up, the exploration and experimentation that you look for in design thinking, right, in creativity, that exploration comes up because you're like, what might happen? Let's give it a try versus, I don't know, it's just not worth the risk. It's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. We're going to need into more of this in a sec. I asked my guests to pick a number as well between 1 and 12, Dom. And the number's linked to what I call killer questions. So what I'll do is you'll pick a number, I'll pick a question, and then I'll come back later on to the answer. So pick a number between 1 and 12.
We'll go for 10.
10. Okay. So the question you've picked is there a moment in your life that changed how people treat you? Okay. So we'll come back to the answer for that later on. I guess, before we get into like the work stuff, I guess when I think about life, I think we talk about how, when you look back at life, you talk about these moments, these defining moments of what makes you. And I guess the question I have for you is, if you was to have like a treasure trove, and in this treasure chest, you can put in one memory where you can relive over and over and over again. What memory would you put in there?
Ooh, there's kind of there's a personal one that jumps out, and there's a professional one that jumps out, and it's fascinating because they're quite different. Let me just flip it, because the professional one's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. I'll share it with you quickly. Is for years I'd had a dream of doing a TED Talk, to the point where I didn't even want to share with people that I wanted to, in case I never got to, because then I would have been disappointed. But I shared with enough people, and it became something that I got to do. And it was weird for me as a moment, because the memory of serendipity, of how it came about, was fascinating. The theme for the year was raw. The topic I wanted to talk about was very raw and completely irrelevant to what I would normally have talked about. So as a work futurist, I'm like, if I'm ever going to do a TED Talk, it's on the future of work. And they're like, the theme's raw. And I'm like, what a relief. Fuck, I've got a story for you, right? And it became a very personal story that I got to tell. The reason I mentioned that memory is important is I actually have no memory of it. So something very weird happened before I went on stage. I had what I can only describe as a Zen moment. I think other people get it doing sort of relaxation techniques, right? And mental wellness and listening to podcasts. I was backstage with the curator and I'm like, this is me. I'm meant to be here. This is what I was always meant to do. And with that came a calmness where I had no cue cards, I had no slides, I had no words, I had no prompts. I just had my 15 minutes. And it was a very intimate occasion because normally TED is filmed in front of thousands of people, but mine was in the pandemic. So there was 20 people in the room, jazz bar style, right? Small tables, 20 sets of eyes staring at me. And that was more intimate and more intimidating. I've done 15,000 people in a room before. That's easy. 20 people staring at you while you share a personal story. Damn, right? That just gets you. But I do not have a single working memory of those 15 minutes.
Wow.
So I remember coming off stage and the curator, Fenella, who's now a good friend of mine, going, you nailed it. And I was like, thank you. And I remember talking to people afterwards. I remember I went for dinner that night with my girlfriend and some friends. Like, I remember all the things before and afterwards. But that 15 minutes is a complete, to the point where months later when they released it, I remember watching it and I'm like, that is me. And they're my words, because I remember I wrote them down. And it felt true and believable, but I don't have an actual working memory of that. And I'd love to go back and just be in that moment again, almost the Zen moment before, but also the moment drawing, to feel that euphoria.
So I'm so glad that was recorded. So I've watched the TED Talk. And yeah, it's really impactful, actually. Really, I don't want to ruin it for people. I don't want to ruin it for people because I think everyone should watch it. But yeah, like there's what I noticed about it, and it's funny. We were chatting with your sister, and we were talking about that. And there's a flow. There's like it's not like it's like this sounds insane. I'm going to say this, but you talk about auroras around people. There's like when you know someone's hitting that stride constantly. Like it's so good. It's so good.
But think about this, Danny, right? Because me and you have exchanged messages before about like the importance of authenticity. We talked before about like how important it is to be yourself. One of the producers of the event beforehand, she's like, we can write your script and put it on the confidence monitor so you can read it if you get lost. And I said, you don't understand. None of this story is in my head. It's all in my heart. Right. And so there's no need for, like, if I miss a word, I miss a word. No one knows other than me. But it's not like I need to remember the words, because they're true stories that are coming out of me, and therefore they're lived memories. Right. So when you're telling a lived memory, the story is very natural. If you're telling someone else's story, you need to write it down because it's not yours. Right. It's innately someone else's. And so that's where I think that a lot of leaders I do a lot of sort of mentoring and coaching with leaders, and they're like, I want to be more authentic. I'm like, in that case, there's really one way of doing it. Either, well, you could go to acting school or be yourself, which takes some level of guts that you may not have had to deploy as a leader before. But trust me, when you do, you get the payback. You're always going to get someone who abuses it. Like, ignore the edge case. The majority of people are going to embrace it. And that for me was that moment. I'm like, I don't need the words written down. These are lived memories and lived experiences for me. The story comes from the heart. It'll be fine anyway.
Nice. So professionally,
that's the professional one, right? Because even though it's a personal story, TED for me sits just in the professional camp. The personal one is silly but fascinating, right? And I'm going to guess you get this a lot from guests. Childhood holidays, right? There was a couple of reasons why, right? My family my little sister will piss herself laughing, but my family will kill me for this. So as kids, we went on a holiday. We were lower middle class, probably, I don't know, our classes as lower middle class. Kids growing up, we never went on overseas holidays, right? We'd pack in the back of this horrible Tangerine Fiesta. We had the trailer on the back with a tent in it, and we drove down to Bournemouth, right? He was up at 3 a.m, stop at the Little Chef, all the things that you did as a family in the summer. But our summer holidays were to a nudist camp. Now, the reason that's a great memory for me, as well as the fact that it took away any inhibitions you can have as a kid, because you can't, because everyone's naked. But my highlight was 4th year junior. My teacher was Mr. Risebrough, very strict, tall guy. He's back in the day when you could physically punish a kid. He used to lift kids up by their ears if they misbehaved. But he was like the scariest teacher in the whole school, whole of junior school. And so when we finish third year, it's like your project for the summer holidays to create a collage of your summer holiday. Now, I don't realize that not everyone goes on nudist camps, right? In my mind, this is normal because there's other people there and no one wears clothes in the summer. And so I'm like, it's cool. So I've got my collage, and my center image is me and my two older sisters. We just won like the family volleyball competition. So we've got sweatbands on, trainers, medals, and that's about it. Now, in my mind, that's a perfectly admissible picture. And so me being the cocky one in class, the minute is like any volunteers, I'm first hand up. You don't even need to get to the R of volunteer. And I'm hand up and I'm like, here's my collage. And so it was a combination. It's a combined one. It was the freedom of those holidays. They were so social. There was always a massive group of kids. It was families only. Like people were like, oh, wasn't it seedy and sexy? Nothing about it. Like it was just families and this like giant sort of party and social gathering. Like it was just crazy, simple fun. But the fact that then when I introduced that into normal society, I got my first organ rejection, which was, no, this isn't okay for your summer holiday collage.
Wow. Yeah. There's some straight away around, whoa, the norms, you're not confining to the norms of what this is. And that's crazy.
But that's what you learn, right? You learn at the edges. What you do is, like in your line of work, normal will give you a repeatable mediocre answer. So you're like, if I need a repeatable mediocre answer, I'll do normal. If I don't, like your line of work, you're permanently taking risks and you're just playing at the edges and just seeing what works and what doesn't. And I think we've all done the same thing in life. Some of us take away those edges. Others go, yeah, let's go and have a play over there and see what happens.
That's where the fun happens. Where the fun happens. It's fascinating. You talk about the mediocre, but like the thing what I hear about this all the time is, oh, what's the best practice? I'm like, no, you don't want best practice. No. Best practice by definition is average. Like it's
or doesn't exist. I mean, a lot of the time it's some cheesy thought leadership with some absolutely crazy framework that was written on a whiteboard that's never been practiced or real, right? So I'm like, cool, if that's your need, Google it, plug it in, go for your life. I guarantee it won't happen. It won't work. But like, if that makes you feel better that Google once did it or Facebook once worked that way or Spotify, I mean, that's not your line of business, but go for it. It's lazy, but I mean, you must see it all the time.
Yeah. It's the one thing what I'm hearing time and time again recently, actually, with a lot of these podcasts at the moment is conformity. Like,
I mean, it happens. Economy's bad, supply chain issues, nervousness around wars, right? There's a whole lot of stuff. And what tends to happen is people go, right, I now need a safe bet. You get a lot of short-termism, and conformity is a guaranteed response, even though deep down I know it's average. But I'm going to get it every time. And so there's a lot of businesses I'm working with now. I'm like, instead of swinging the pendulum, we have this, there's a game I played. I did this with a senior leader the other week, and he was getting tied up by stuff. CTO of a giant organization. I was like, time out, pause. I'm like, 3 Fs: fixed, flexible, and free. And he's like, well, I was like, get your pen out. I was like, fixed. This is the process, adherence, conformity, all those things. And he's like, right. I said, you only do that when you want one way of doing it, and that one way is so universally right, it's worth the trade-off, right? You don't want any variation. I was like, the next one is flexible. Flexible is, Danny, you can do this A, B, or C, but you can't do D, E, or F. I've chosen A, B, or C, and so you can play with that. You tailor that to your environment, but it's A, B, or C. And he's like, right. And I was like, and the free is, I don't care how you do it. Go for local optimization. Go for your life, but you own the trade-off. So if you go off reservation and you do it differently, there better be a return. And so when I talked him through an example of that, he's like, oh shit, we've been doing fixed for like a year and it's not working. I was like, no, because you're hiring people that expect some free and flexible, and you're trying to fix them. The two don't gel really well because you're constraining them too much and not in a creative way.
I'm trying to find a bridge between your holidays to this next question, and there's not one there. So I'm just going to go straight in. And maybe there's a bridge. What's the thing you don't get to share?
Well, the pictures from those school holidays. There you go. There's your link.
Yeah. But I mean, like, from such a great point.
I still can't believe you ever gotten developed at Boots or Superdrug or wherever it was. Like, they must have been looking at those pictures going, where have they been? They can't afford clothes, poor thing.
But that's true now, you know. You can't, if you went there,
you'd never get done, would you?
Yeah.
Would have been arrested. And you know the irony, just a quick tangent for you, this is how messed up the world is. We used to do swimming club at these nudist camps, and if you passed your test at the swimming club, you got a badge. Where am I sewing it on? I'm not wearing anything.
Don't you trainers? That's everything you got on.
So there's not anything. I'm a very overtly open person. That said, I'm also one I want to be exceptionally private. And so one of the things that I've been working on recently is like the circles, right? The ever cascading circles. So the inner circle get pretty much unfiltered access. And the innermost circle is my brain, right? The next circle out is me, my girlfriend, right? The kids. And then you've got the really close friends who you share a lot with, you can be vulnerable with when you've got challenges, when things are going well. They cry with you when things are shit, and they hug you and celebrate when things are great. And so all those circles exist. And so I'm like, I'm honest with everyone, but the openness varies. Right. So I'm like, nice. I'm always going to be honest because I've got no interest in lying. But how honest I am, right, is a spectrum of in the middle circle, very honest, to the outer circle. Very honest. And then I'm not going to be as open on the outer circle. I'm like, there's some things that I'm just either you're not going to understand, you've not got context for, or it's none of your business. And so that openness by default works for me as a style. And then one of the things me and my girlfriend have been practicing, certainly since we have had kids, is how can we be more open around how we're feeling, what's going on, just because of the sheer rate of change we've been through in the last 2 years of being pregnant and then having twins. We're both English, living in Australia, no family around. It just comes with its own challenges. And so that's required a dial-up on honesty and a dial-up on openness and honesty around uncomfortable conversations, which we've gone, you know what, if we don't have these, they get brushed under the carpet and they'll come back and haunt us. So we're going to have them. It doesn't make them any easier.
Yeah, I like that. I think the circles is a really nice way to frame it. Years ago when I was younger, I had this thing where I had to have this, my worth was on how many friends I had and how many people was around me, and it's a bit like Facebook, right? And then eventually I remember over time going, oh, actually, there was a moment where I had a real dark time in my life, and I was like, out of these hundreds of thousands of people, that's an over exaggeration, out of these many people, how many of these are here right now at this time of need? And then it kind of made me start going, oh, actually, I don't need to invest that time there, because I see time investment in friendship. It's an investment. It's an exchange. It's a huge investment. And it's not, I mean, I think this comes with experience. It doesn't have to be, I used to think tit for tat and it had to be equal. And now it has to be reciprocal. As in we both have to give a shit about each other, but it doesn't mean we invest the exact same amount of time. That's going to vary, right, as environments and circumstances change. But we need to care it. We need to be willing to invest to the same altitude. Yeah, 100%. I think just putting it in circles is just a really nice way to go. Here, as you go wider, obviously your levels.
I'll tell you why I did it, because I had this realization when the kids came along, and this was part of the openness, right? With Becca, my girlfriend. I was just really down one night, and she's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, I don't think I can be a good dad, a good partner, a good manager, right, or a good employee, a good friend, and a good footballer, and I all the things that I want to be good at don't fit into 24 hours in a day. And now I'm petrified. I'm either going to be mediocre at all of them, or I'm going to have to drop one of them, and I don't know how it works. And then I was like, I can't be the 80% person at work, and I don't want to be the 80% person. And I was just having all these mental challenges with it. And then some of it was just prioritization. But on the social side is about going, if I have a finite amount of time to spend socializing, this has now got a heightened need for me. Because when I go out and it's without my girlfriend or without the kids, I know that she's with the kids and alone or whatever. I'm like, this has to pay a dividend, right? So therefore, that inner circle got smaller, because I'm like, it needs to be the very much the right people in there. There's no room for a dalliance in there, right? It needs to be high fidelity, high trust, good safety, good conversations, and reciprocal. So that shrunk, and it's not that anyone on the outside was bad. I was just I can't spend as much time with you because I'm not going to be coming out for drinks 2 or 3 times a week. I'm going to be coming out for drinks maybe once a week. So if I'm coming out once, not 3, I'm now putting all my bets on that one. I want it to be good, right? And it's not a steaming night where we end up doing karaoke necessarily. It's, did I have a conversation where I learned something about you, you learned something about me, I got something off my chest, we laughed, right? We cried, whatever the thing is, is it that? And that's the energy that I get from it.
Nice. So it sounds to me, Dom, the more we chat, there's a skill you have, which is that inner reflection, right? Like there's that inner kind of, and I think it's fascinating because a lot of leaders who I know don't seem to have that as a skill, a trait. It can be developed, but I think some people naturally get it. Some people have developed it over time, and just you thinking there, I'm going to be the dad, the employee, the this, the that, the that. There's a lot of inner reflection. Where does that come from? Is that something you've had, or is that something you've just developed over time?
I think had in some regard for probably a good while, even as a kid. I remember, like, whether it be an exam result, right, or feedback on anything in a schooling sense or educational sense, there was always that sense of what could I have done better if I had my time again, what I'd do differently. So I think that's just partially genetically in there. I think I fell into the trap most leaders do at some point in my career when I'm like, I'm done. I'm the finished article. Here's my leadership portfolio of skills that I have. If I just continue to deploy these, I'll continue to get pay rises, bonuses, and I'll live a happy life. And got caught out, but by becoming slowly irrelevant. And so that didn't happen quickly. It's just bit by bit, I'm like, something's not feeling right. And I was really fortunate, probably like 4 or 5 years ago now. I was in New York with work. We'd acquired a business that had an office there, and met a lady for the first time called Sophie Wade. Sophie's hilarious. English lady, lives in New York, mad as a box of frogs, but just phenomenal human being. And over a Pinot Noir, we just got chatting about stuff, and she gave me an exercise that I still do today. So I do it every 90 days, which is an exercise on me as a leader. And it's fascinating. I got to a stage a few years ago where I just couldn't read any more business books. Now, I imagine this is the same for you. You'll get sent a lot. And people just keep, I've written a business, I'm sending it to you. I'm like, I didn't ask for it, but thanks anyway. And I'd get them. And occasionally I'd read them and nothing stuck, nothing went in. And there's a whole lot of reasons why, which we can unpack. But I'm like, that's not my learning style. I still need to learn though. So what is my learning style? And so what I realized with this exercise is, if I do a reflection every 90 days on me as a leader, what I do is I share my results. And when I share my results, my network says to me, you should chat to Danny. He's awesome at that. He can help you. Or you should chat to Mary. She can really help you. Or have you thought about this? And so I basically built this weird unofficial peer-to-peer networking whereby I learn from people that have done it, not from someone that thought about it and wrote a book. And it turns out I learn infinitely more from the person with a lived experience of it than I do from the person that's like, here's my framework on the front page and 24 chapters where I repeat it. And so now I've realized that learning style, it's up to me to do the reflection and then put that out in the universe to get the payback.
Nice. There's something about lived experience. And I think I've got all my books are there in front of me now. And I look at some of these books and I reckon you could distill down 95% of these books into a handful of things. And we're all saying the same thing one way or another.
Yeah.
And going back to your point, right, like some of it's not stuck in. And the reality of it is because probably you can identify that actually that's just a rebrand of something. What was a rebrand of something? Like this consistent cycle.
Or I'll tell you the difference. There is a few people that I've met that have sort of turned me slightly. There was something else, and I've forgotten who it was. Two guys I know from Stanford Uni, right? Bob Sutton and Huggy Rao, right? Hello, they're like the odd couple. But every time they write a book, they always write examples. And so they'd sent me an excerpt from their book earlier this year, and I read a bit of it. I'm like, that's really easy to read. And I thought they'd give me like a dumbed down version. And it's not that it's dumbed down. It's just like, here's a statement we believe to be true. Here's an example. I'm like, it's the examples that are memorable because they're real, right? Rather than the theory. And so for me, the minute I get overconsumed in theory, my brain just switches off because it can't compute it, because it can't bring it into a real life situation.
Yeah. So I'm bang on for this, probably from a different angle. So dyslexic, dyspraxic. So I'm like, bullshit baffles brains, and I want layman language.
Yeah.
And if you can't put it into a layman language with an example, I don't take it for, I just go, nah, it's pointless.
Because the example for me takes it from theory, right? So there's a phrase that I use at the start of my keynote to the minute, which is dysfunction is the gap between what you know and what you apply. Right. And the reason I mention that is I think as a society, we have knowledge obesity. We've got fat on knowledge. We acquire knowledge and then go, there you go, brilliant. And you're like, no. Until you deploy that knowledge, until you activate it, It's not real, right? It's just sat there in your library in your head, but it's pointless. It's literally gathering dust and it's a waste until you use your hands or your mouth or something to turn it into action. And so with my team this year, when we're setting our goals, I was like, let's make every goal about activation. Every goal is not what we did, right? That's a set of tasks or projects. The goal is, how did we make someone else feel and act?
Nice.
And we sat there at this offsite and you're like, oh, like that hurts. You're like, oh, okay. And you're like, it feels right. But then how do we measure that? I'm like, don't worry about measurement. Like, what are the things we'd do if the outcome we were measuring was how we activated someone to behave better, right? To find a better way of working, to be more innovative, right? In your world, to find new ways of solving stuff. If we could unleash that and they felt great as a leader, great as a teammate and achieved great things, then we've done our job. So what are the things we'd do? They're the most important things to do. Don't worry about whether we've got a thermometer to shove in them and measure it or not, because we'll know. We'll know if we've done it.
Yeah. It's interesting when we talk about measurement, and I think once a measurement becomes a goal, then obviously there's a whole principle around it's no longer the measurement. But you're right, like you just said something, like you'll see it. You'll optically you'll be able to go there. I think that's a real undervalued trait, and maybe it's because organizations get over index on measurement, like everything's got to be measured.
Yeah, or as you will have seen, you go through that innovation curve where you take risks, you explore, you experiment, you become successful, then you've got something to protect. And you get really conservative quickly. You're like, no, we've got this land now, we need to look after the land. And you're like, no, you've been successful by building new forests, right? By planting seeds and nurturing them. Like, no, now we have a forest, we're going to build a fence around it. You're like, you've missed the point, right? And they switch their behavior the opposite of what made them successful.
It's fascinating. I want to geek out now on this, so I want to get talking about work stuff.
Yay!
Kind of something we have. But before I do, I've got the question. So the question which I asked you was question 10: is there a moment in your life that changed how people treat you? What comes to mind for that?
Yeah, so there's two moments that combined, right? And you know about this, the start of 2020. I think everything had been relatively consistent in life until that point. Again, if everyone goes and watches the TED Talk, you'll go enjoy that. But for the Reader's Digest version is I had my own diagnosis with cancer, which I was very fortunate to get early, dealt with, now all good, touch wood, and no long-lasting impacts. But my older sister, who'd been suffering for about 6 years with breast cancer, a few months later passed away. And so there's a moment there that changed for me where I was actually not officially able to travel out of Australia. We closed our borders, for those that don't know, when the pandemic hit. And as a non-citizen, it was illegal for me to try and leave the country. I would have to have rescinded my citizenship to leave Australia. And you had to get permission. And I tried 6 times and failed. And finally, at the 7th time, somehow got the pass. And so I was able to travel back and spend that time with my sister before she passed away. And there's something about that experience for me in how it helped me think about life and mortality and the whole stuff, but also in terms of what you value, like in terms of getting on a plane, disappearing from Australia, being with my sister, all the things that came out from that felt very natural. It didn't feel like a set of trade-offs. It's a silly analogy, but I liken it to, like, when you're a teenager and you're dating someone, you start doing the pros and cons list. If you're doing a pros and cons list, it's a no, right? And similarly with big life important stuff, if you're weighing up the yay or nay, it's probably a no, right? Whereas when you're in that zone, you're like, this is something you just have to do. And there's I think there's a way I feel like I carried myself through that time, and then how I responded when I came back to Australia, and how I just kind of went, you know what? I was 42. I was exceptionally lonely. I was sat in hotel quarantine for 14 days, locked in a room in a hotel in Sydney. And I'm like, you're single. You've got a good career. Your bank balance is okay. You're really single. And your best friend, right, your older sister's just passed away and you've just buried her in Manchester. So you've got this moment where you're like, am I going to go down or go up? Like, is this going to spiral me out and I'm going to bury myself, or am I going to use this in some way to go, you know what, sod it. Like this is the stimulus. This is the platform that we now build off. And there were dark days in there where it was going to send me down. And then with my own steam, right, with my own fruition, I'm like, no, I'm not going to let it bury me, right? For my benefit, for my sister's benefit, for everyone's benefit, I'm going to, it's that shit or get off the pot moment. I'm like, it's time to get on with it. And so literally just grabbed my life by the scruff of the neck and unapologetically just started getting on with stuff, but with a method in the madness, right? There was a rationale to all of it. So, within a few days of getting out of quarantine, I went on my first date with my now fiance, right? 3 and a bit years later, we're building a house, we're engaged to be married, and we got twins. I'm like, shit, that was not on the cards, right? That was, I mean, potentially going to happen by accident, but that was not on the cards because there wasn't anyone either I was letting in or who'd let me in. So from that moment on, there's a set of decisions that I made of how I wanted to turn up. And whether everyone likes it or not, I'm indifferent to. I kind of don't care about. I'm being the person I want to be, right? And so from that standpoint, that's all I can control, right? I can't control someone else's expectations of me. That's in their head. But I can control how I turn up, and that moment, right, and how I think I've turned up since then is something that is quite important to me.
Nice. Feel free to answer this or don't answer this, Dom. In the times where you with dark moments, so I've talked about this in the past, but it's not about me, it's about you. Who was the one person who constantly shown up for you?
Me.
Okay. That's the right answer, right?
Yeah, because
there's no right or wrong. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there's people I leaned on in different ways, but I'm like, you're a 42-year-old man, right? The world isn't happening to you. There's a set of conscious choices. Yeah, some bad stuff's happened. Bad stuff happens to everyone. So, how are we going to deal with this? And the we is me, right? It's the voice in the head and the voice that comes out. And so I think part of that was a byproduct of being in quarantine. It was a very lonely moment. And so I had to do this for me, not for someone else at that time. And yeah, like the sort of memory of my sister and the banter we had and the challenges we set and the life she wanted me to lead and go do, that voice was in there. But I can't do it for her. I need to do it for me. I need to want to do it for me. Once I built that foundation, I then found it a lot easier to be selfless. Right. So if I think about it, the person that's my rock right now is my girlfriend, right, Becca, because we have that openness and I have someone that I can be vulnerable with and share everything with. But I didn't have that before. So I couldn't lean on anyone because there were too many masks. Right. You said before, until you drop the mask, you can't rely on anyone else because you're just going to tell the story the narrative you want, not the real one. So I'm like, the only person that doesn't know about that can pull the mask off is me. Right, so have that chat. Wouldn't recommend it to everyone. Wouldn't recommend quarantine to everyone as well. But for me, it worked in that moment. And I think since then, I've had other people I could lean on. But I don't think I could have leaned on them for that first instance.
Again, it's, again, I said it earlier, but there's a lot around there for me, Dom, is like that deep inner work. Like, it's always that deep inner work what you're doing, which, again, if it's something you could bottle up, I would say, give me some of that. Every leader should have some of a Dom inner work in them. So
it's funny you mention it because I see leaders trying to work on it, but for dividend, they're trying to do it to get ahead. And I'm like, that's not the reason. The reason to do it is first of all, you've got to accept that you're not the finished article. And most leaders have too big an ego to accept that. And the second one is you have to have a desire for self-improvement. Because if you just learn about the things that you're bad at and you don't do anything about it, that's depression. Right, you're literally beating yourself up. That's pointless. So those two questions I use when I'm doing mentoring with leaders as qualifiers. Like, are you the finished article? Let's have an honest conversation. Are you the finished article? Yay or nay? And if not, where do you struggle? And they're like, I don't really know. I work too hard. I'm like, nah, you've just been an arsehole. Like, be honest. So question one. And then question two is, if you do find something out, if we get a bit of feedback and you find something out, are you willing to action it? And if those two are a no, then we can't proceed. Right? Because I can't help you as a mentor. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you dance because I don't want to hear your convenient narrative you spent hours rehearsing. Like, I want to hear the truth. And those two are often very different.
Nice. Talking about kind of piecing things together and, questioning, you did the Modern Manifesto.
Yes.
I'm not sure how well out this is in the air, but Dom, maybe you could share what that is.
Yeah, little background. So I work for a technology company, work futurist, dealing with a lot of organizations that are going through some kind of transformation, culture transformation, digital transformation, agile transformation, you name it. Everyone's going through some kind of transformation. And my job is to help them unpack the ways of working, the human part of work, right? So my fascination is all around teamwork, not technology, but teamwork. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I spent half my time outside Atlassian, where the organization I work for, with customers and clients and anyone of any shape and size, helping them unpack what's working and what's not. And I just had some downtime a couple of months ago, and I sat down, I'm like, I'm certain there's some gold in here. And I'm looking back through my notes. I'm certain there's some threads or things, and I start to piece it together. And then it just kind of leapt out at me that there was these areas. And what I'll just explain to people is it's not right from wrong. I purposely use the word over, right? So I'll give 2 examples that work for me. There's a lot of senior leaders I work with, and I'm like, you've got a lot of content. You've got stuff everywhere. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, cool, because you want context. So the Modern Work Manifesto says context over content. Content's not bad, but if all you have is content, you're not going to do anything. Context is, what's the next action? What decision do I need to make? How can I amplify you? What's the next milestone? Like, how can I progress this or do something more or better or bigger, right? So context is what we all want in work. Like, why am I doing what am I doing, right? And that wrapper. And when we have that, we're like, boom. And when we don't, we're like, I don't know, I'm just doing stuff, right? And stuff is like boring. Stuff is when you get to the end of the week and you're like, I've been busy, and your missus or your cactus or your dog says to you, have you been effective? And you're like, I'm busy. And you're like, no one wants to be busy. Busy's crap, right? So context over content is one. And then probably my favorite at the moment is when I talk about silos, right? So it's flow over silos. So flow says work happens that way, happens horizontally across an organization. And silos are built vertically, right? So my pet peeve, if I had a magic wand and I could get rid of something from existence that has been invented, I'd get rid of the org chart. Because the org chart says who you work for, it doesn't say who you work with, and it talks nothing about the value you generate for your end customer. In fact, the customer's not even on the org chart. They're not represented. So the org chart is your craft, which is the people that you share a language with, but it ignores the complexity of the people you work with who speak a different language. And so I'm like, cool, let's look at flow across an organization. Who are the people upstream and downstream? Again, terminology from flow, upstream and downstream. What are the people upstream doing? What do I do? What do the people downstream do? And how do we optimize that flow to get value into our customers' hands quicker? That's a different set of relationships to who do I work for. The person I work for does my performance review and approves my expenses. That's it. I don't need them to feed me, right? To feed me and to feed the organization, I work horizontally. And the way you know this is, right, in organizations in peacetime, they work up and down the chain of command. However nimble they think they are, they work up and down the chain of command. What happens is when an organization is in crisis, you forget the org chart and you're like, right, there's a crisis. Who do we need? I need Danny, Bob, Mary, Aditya, and Jane. You're like, cool. You get in a room. No one said, I'm from HR or I'm from legal. Everyone's just like, what's the thing? Right? And we spike, we fix it. And then Monday comes along. You're like, I hate you. I hate you now. It was so nice working with you last week on that incident, and we're all friends and we solved the problem. But now we've solved the problem. I've gone back to my people and I don't like you anymore. Even though you work for the same company with the same goals, I detest you because you're HR, I'm legal, they're operations, no one likes operations, right? And so this flow over silos is, silos aren't bad. Ask any farmer. Silos are good, right? So when you talk about innovation, silo is good because you protect an idea and you nurture it till it's ready to germinate and bring out into the wild. So silos are good. If you only ever work in a silo, silos are bad. So how do we get flow state, right? And that for me in modern businesses is something virtually every leader is craving and doing very little to achieve, right? They do a lot to achieve the up and down. They optimize, they become efficient up and down, and they don't maximize their flow across.
So when you sent me this, I remember where I was. You know, like there's certain key moments in life where you go, I know where I was. And when you sent me this, I was like, I was on the train. I was like, I think I was on the train. I was like, yes, this is brilliant. I remember reading it over like 4 or 5 times. I was like, this is fucking brilliant. Like it was just.
But you can see why, because it's not. I wasn't out to create a framework. That wasn't the goal. The goal was how can I summarize 8 years of work and some threads to prompt a better conversation. So you've got all 8 and you can share it in your show notes, whatever, mate, like share it, whatever. But the fascinating thing is when I do this with execs, I put it in front of them and say, which one of these is your superpower and which one's your kryptonite?
Ah, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And this is what any of your audience can do. You look at it and like one of them will stand out. You're like, we're pretty good at that. We're nailing it consistently. And there's another one you look at and you're like, yep, that's holding us back. That's the anchor that's slowing us down. So it's like, cool. Instead of focusing on the thing that's going well and trying to dial it up more, maybe just find the thing you're struggling with, not to make it amazing, but to make it slightly less bad, right? But work out where you place your bets.
So when I think about work, well, it's more an employee experience lens, but I use this analogy of spies. Stick with me here. It's a working title. And it started building this in 2018. I was like, well, actually, when you think about work, it's a collection of services, products, interactions, and experiences.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And actually underneath it, there's a subscription model.
Yeah.
Your employees decide whether they're going to subscribe to work or not, based on how well that benefits and the value out of them experiences, interactions. And I remember I came up with it with a guy called David James, 2018-19. Semi-drunk. That's probably where the name came from.
Not a surprise though, right? Because you've taken like the drunk thing and you've made that flippant, but pay that, which is it just liberalized your thought process. You have less recourse. You get a little bit more, let's experiment, right? Which is why those things often happen in those moments.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so true. Like when you're super, super tired and when you're drunk, it just, everything just goes out the window. Like, I ain't got time for logical thinking. And I loved this because then I started going, okay, well, let me look at this and let me have a look at that. And I was just like, wow, this is awesome. I think that I'm so glad you picked the kind of the flow over silo. And there's another one around team over individual as well, which is like I started to pick that part. I was like, wow, that starts to look at team dynamics.
It's over, right? I keep on enforcing this for people. I'm like, it's not instead of, like, individuals are important. Deep work is important. Time by yourself, wellness. Like, I use this cheesy analogy. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help someone else. So individuals, crucial. And there's too many leaders I work with that are martyrs. They arrive in meetings and they're distracted. They're in the last meeting. They're on the laptop. They're thinking about something else. I'm like, go away. You're no use here, right? But they think they're being a martyr turning up and it's stupid. But team is where you balance. Right, you optimize for the team. The team is where you compromise and you make trade-offs. That the team is delivering something of value to a customer, and that's where you've got to sacrifice some of your individual needs and make the compromise. Right, and so that's why it's the over again. And I think what happens is people swing the pendulum. I hear it all the time. It's all about teamwork. Teamwork's the answer. You're like, no, it's not. And they're like, okay, in that case, it's all about the individual. You're like, no, it's not binary. You bloody idiot. It's both. And how do you deploy both in a fashion that adds value?
So this gets me thinking. So worked for an innovation company a few years ago. Brilliant innovation company, top 3 innovation companies in the world. And there was one around teamwork. Mm-hmm. And I came in and they brought me in to challenge how they do things because we've used the same process and whatever else for years. And I remember coming in and going, right, as a team, we're going around in circles now. But it might look like we're going down. We're getting to a point now where there's no more value in this. We need to now disperse and come back. And I think they over-indexed on the teamwork. Back to your thing of, so there's time and place for both, right? Like it's not one or the other, like you say.
Dude, post-pandemic, I think there's another pandemic that's not being talked about, which is this over-index on team cohesion. It's like, I'm so nervous about the things that went wrong for people during the pandemic. Everyone's going to be nice to each other, but dishonest at the same time, right? Which is when you're in those workshops and you're like, is anyone going to make the decision? And you're like, hang on, before we decide, we've got to include Danny. Danny, what do you think? Right, Molly? And you're like, stop including people. We need to make a decision, right? And so we've actually, there's one of the epidemics I'm seeing right now is over collaboration. I must have everyone's opinion. I'm going to aggregate all the things. And then I'm going to try and find the one idea that satisfies the majority of people. And you're like, why? So one of the practices we've got at work, like when we're trying to make a decision, the first thing we pick is who's consulted and who's informed. The informed always think they should be consulted every time, right? But the rule on consulted is you're highly impacted, highly impacted, and or a subject matter expert. Everyone else, is informed, right? Really controversial. People are like, I should be consulted on that. No, you're informed. When we make a decision, we'll let you know. If you don't like that, tough. We've made the decision and we're going to go ahead with it anyway. We've considered the options. We're going to go ahead with it because the opinion of the consulted people is more important than yours. And so we suffered this in our organization as we scaled. We cared so much about people's opinions when we were small, and we could pass them in a way that was effective. And we got to a certain size, you're like, turns out everyone still has an opinion. We've now just got a lot more of them. And so the diversity there stopped being valuable. It actually stops us from collaborating meaningfully. So this is where like building an inclusive environment is sometimes about saying, who are the people I'm going to listen to on this thing and whose opinions am I going to ignore because they're less relevant, and doing that on purpose, not by accident.
Yes. I have nothing else to add over. Yes. I want to take this conversation around somewhere where you might be a bit bored of talking about. So forgive me.
Forgiven already.
And it's a world of hybrid work.
Yeah. So give me my favorite trigger word.
Yeah. Oh, nosebleed. So I have a newsletter going out today. My Getting Out newsletter is around I call it culture rot. I think this is what we're going to start seeing soon, this culture rot. And what I mean by that is you have these big brands, and I'll pick two. Disney, Lego.
Yeah.
Right? Disney, all of a sudden, I seen a job the other day, which was, we do hybrid, 4 days in the office. I'm like, that's not hybrid.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you're going to get this thing where, as an employee, there's not many companies like Disney who have the same big brand kudos. So you're going to get these people who are going to come in, but not going to want to be there anymore. They've tasted what life is like without it. And you're going to this rot, what will start to form. But then it feels like all of a sudden, over here in the UK, we had 4-day work week and all these other things, and all that's slowly disappearing. What's your take on hybrid now as it stands, Dom?
So let's unpack this using your world, right? Because I think this is where it gets really, really powerful. So there's a few organizations, and it's sad that it's a few, but there's a few that have gone, let's look at our employee value proposition for the market we're in, for the kind of people we want to hire, and the job we need them to do. And that is made up of the perks and the ways of working and the technology they use and the salary, made up a whole lot of stuff. And when you do that in a very thoughtful way, which is, here's our employee value prop, the people that self-select into that are the ones that want that. They value the things that you're offering, right? It's a transaction. And what tends to happen, the word tends is important there, but what tends to happen is when that marriage is nice, when it's symbiotic, you get discretionary effort from people, right? Me and you know what that feels like when you're in that space where you're like, you get me, I get you. And it's not that you pay me too much or give me too many perks. You just give me the perks that work for me. They resonate. And therefore, when I have a new idea, I'm going to deploy my discretionary effort, my innovation, creative juices, whatever, to you. And when that goes, I'm going to spend my creative juices on my side hustle because I don't like you anymore. And it feels binary like that. It's not that binary. It's a spectrum. The weird thing is, in the last 2 years, we've taken one sliver of that employee value prop, one sliver, and gone, let's create a hot debate on it. And so I get asked all the time, should we do a 4-day week or a 5-day week? And I'm like, why? Like, why do we have to pick one? Why can't it be build your own adventure? They're like, oh my God. And then this whole, like, the number of organizations say, we give people flexibility. They work from the office on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I'm like, that's not flexibility. That's control with options. And it's not bad, but call it what it is. Now, here's the thing that I've done this session a few times with senior execs from different organizations who normally are nervous that I'm going to spruik remote work or I'm going to spruik something that they're not doing. And I'm like, I haven't got a horse in this race, right? You're your company, you do you. I'm doing my own, right? So I've got that bit sorted. But what I say to them is, whatever you sign up for, your teams are working in a distributed fashion, right? So if Danny, if me and you work in an office and you're in Manchester and I'm in Sydney, even if we're physically in offices, we're in different time zones, different customs, different cultures. So whether we're at home or office is actually a complete misnomer. It's a false data read that is irrelevant to the discussion. What's really important is, how do we work to work effectively together? And so I think the muscle that we want to build as a business society is, how do I get better at working in distributed teams? How do I build trust and cohesion quickly so I get psychological safety, so I can be effective, so we can have arguments and discuss and debate and have respectful dissent and friction and innovation. How do I do all that? How do I celebrate? How do I build momentum? How do I do all that stuff? And what are the occasions when we need time together? When I'll pony up for a flight and we meet because there's a high fidelity transaction and we want to do some level of intentional togetherness, right? Whatever those transactions are. And when you build that rhythm and cadence, you build highly effective distributed teams that can basically operate pretty much anywhere in the world. The thing is, we're wasting all of our energy right now on 5-day week, 4-day week, Monday at home, Tuesday at home, right? And there's an organization I work with, they're like, we've told people that they must come in as a team on Wednesday because we need them to collaborate and be creative. And I'm like, oh, that's really handy because we all know Wednesday's the day, right? Because your Wednesday, my Wednesday, I just wake up hump day, middle of the week, and I'm like, I'm on. It's time to be creative. Yesterday, I was very compliant, and Thursday, I'm very compliant, but Wednesdays. And I'm like, you're missing the point of serendipity. But I get it. They're grappling for compliance. They're grappling for adherence versus going, if you've hired fully formed adults, how do you build, and we talk about guardrails. I'm like, not the wild, wild west, right? It's not a free state of blank paper, but nor is it prescribed. In the middle, it's guardrails. And for me, I'm certain that guardrails and fully formed adults are a marriage made in heaven. And when you do that, whole of that debate goes away. Like, I don't care if your team chooses to do night times and morning, like, you do you. You know the outcome you're achieving. You've got the people, you've got the tools. I trust you to get on with it and let me know if you're struggling. And it's just a different mindset.
It's funny. So I was working with a client a while back, and I said to him, I was like, look, your EVP, it was an EVP piece of work. It was redesigning, looking at the EVP. And I was like, think of it from this point of view: practices, people, props, process, policy, and profit. And we had this whole kind of debate. Anyway, we created this EVP. And we did so much interview, so much insight, like lots of horizon scanning and whatever else. Anyway, showing this EVP, and it was like, this is great work. So I was like, look, there's a key thing around your people want this flexibility. Yeah. They want this flexibility to, like you say, I don't want to come in on a Wednesday because that's a creative day. And they turned around and went, oh, we won't do that. But what about if we give them a swimming pool? And I was just like, holy shit.
So here's this is happening on steroids. So there's an organization I work with in my spare time, right? It's an old Atlassian colleague. And if you've not had a play with it, you should do. It's called PIN, P-Y-N. And they built an employee journey mapping tool. They launched it for free like a week and a half ago. And I was chatting to Joris, one of their co-founders, and he's like, dude, it's gone berserk to the point where it's confused him. He's like, I've been in HR people and employee journey mapping for years, and we've just given what we thought was a readily accessible tool to people. And they're like, oh my God, now we're mapping this, we're seeing all these gaps. And he said to me, what were they doing before?
Yeah.
Right. But again, so it's one of those things where you're like, you put a really simple tool out to map your own employee value and look at the sentiment of where there's pick up and drop off. And they're like, oh, it turns out that we spent so much time on 90-day plans, but our candidate experience is awful. Or we keep on saying flexibility, but then all we do is offer them a swimming pool, or we offer them lunches, but we tell them to work from home. Like all this stuff that you see is completely at odds and at a battle with each other. And he just said to me, he's like, it honestly begs the question, these organizations, these senior leaders, what were they operating off? And I think they're operating off instinct and legacy is my honest answer. Like it used to work, so maybe it still doesn't. And then worst case, let's chuck 40 million at a set of consultants and they'll come and tell us the answer, right? Versus going, how do we make this work for us and build our company version of this that works for us and our people and our customers? That takes a little bit more effort, but that personalization lasts for years.
Yeah. I think, so I've seen that. I think I've seen it come up on my timeline on LinkedIn, but it's fascinating. So I spend a lot of time doing blueprinting, doing mapping. I'm like, the amount of companies who don't understand the service blueprint blows my mind. Yeah. I'm like, how do you know what's going on backstage, front stage, and how that all connects? And it's. But then you've got to invest the time.
What we've got to remember is legacy is really cheap because you inherit, right? And sometimes that cheapness is good. Right. So I laughed. There was a team a few years ago I was working with, and they were literally paralyzed. They couldn't get any work done. And I was like, what is it you're waiting for? And they're like, well, it's June. We don't want to start any work because the strategy will come out in July. I was like, what? I'm guessing the strategy will be very similar to last year's, maybe plus a few points, minus a few points, but generally directionally the same thing. And they're like, nah, we'll wait. right? So sometimes you're like, that's just weird. And other times legacy is better, where we're like, I'm just going to copy this because it kind of worked last year. And you're like, actually, no, you should make a change. And so I think this is where when I work with organizations with legacy, I'm like, either this heritage and history becomes your superpower of wisdom that amplifies you, or it becomes the noose around your neck. And basically, you'll be, I actually did say this to a leader a few years ago, your next job will be the tour guide at the museum because this company won't exist anymore.
That's quite a bold statement, right?
Well,
that's
I
a
mean,
shock
if
of a
you have
deep.
an honest conversation,
Yeah.
I'm like, the way you are going, your obsession with history, heritage, and the legacy, you'll be showing people around, here's how we used to do things. This is what it was like when we used to have employees, because you are driving this business into the ground. You don't want that. You're telling me you don't want that, but it's what you're doing.
Yeah. That must be a tricky one, right? Like when we think about some of them conversations must be a tricky one to have, but I think it's
like, the longer the tenure, the closer that is to someone, right? Because it did used to work. And I'm not saying it didn't work. It did used to. It definitely did used to. Let's have a celebration and a wake for it, pop it in the past on the shelf, and find a new way that we think might be better. And you know what? If the new way doesn't work, go back to the old way. Like, none of us are doing heart surgery, so no one's going to die. So try the new way, and if it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, drop back to the old way. I'm not bothered. But if you don't try it, you'll never know.
But you've touched on the sweet spot of mine, which is experimentation, behavioral experimentation, and just experimentation in general. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what I've noticed in lots of companies who I've worked with or worked for, they like the language of experimentation. But when you go, well, this is what experimentation looks like, and this is how you got to roll your sleeves up and do it. It's a sleeves rolled up job. It's not a let's talk about and do nothing. And then the head falls off because oh, we're not set up for this. How do you overcome that, I guess?
So I have a belief that every organization has a currency. For many organizations that you and me dabble with, that currency is certainty. And the funny thing is, it doesn't exist. Hello? That certainty is not there. It's a cloak, right? That feels nice, but certainty is not there. So the flip of that is confidence. How can I gain confidence over time? And those confidence organizations, they explore and experiment. They're like, here's where I am today. I want to learn a bit more. The only way of learning that is to explore and experiment. And they do that. And the ones that just want certainty, they're like, I'm going to do what I did last year. And you're like, cool. That will give you a shrinking dividend over time.
Experimentation.
Yes. I was saying that I have a belief that every organization has a currency, right? And for some organizations, that currency is consistency, right? They're like, and certainty. They're like, I want to be certain. So they build a business case, and section 14.2.6 says, here's the plan that gets the business case approved. And me and you look at it and go, we know that will never happen though, right? And they're like, no, that's the plan. That's what we've committed to. So that desire for certainty means you place the same bet on repeat. There's a lot of organizations I'm working with that have realized that the real currency is confidence. And confidence is, here's where I'm at today. So what hypotheses or assumptions have I got? What assumptions have I got? How do I build those into hypotheses? How do I experiment to learn more, to get more confidence I'm doing the right thing at the right time in the right way? Knowing you never reach 100%, right? You just get confident to a point where you then ship something, and even then you're going to get feedback from customers. Some will love it, some won't. So you never actually get to 100%. The minute you accept that 100% is not a thing, you're like, in that case, forget certainty. That's a waste. Like the only certainty in life, life, death, taxes, right? Everything else is about confidence. So you're like, cool. In that case, the game is, how do I get more confident? And so the thing I've been talking about for a few years now is, how do you improve your learning velocity? Not shipping velocity, but learning velocity. Because I have a belief that if you can take an insight quicker than your competition, turn that insight into an action, course correct, try something, get it out there and see if it works or not, and get another insight, the quicker you go through that loop, that build, measure, learn loop, you beat your competition. Because you're faster at learning and adapting to the environment. And I think in the slightly cutthroat world of business right now, adaptability and agency and certainty are way more powerful and important than certainty, long-range plans, right? And this old waterfall, like, here's my 3-year transformation.
But I think you've touched on a really good point there, right? Like, a lot of people, when you think about experimentation, you think of it like as success, not success. I'm like, no, the goal of experimentation is learning. Like, what have we learned? What can we twist, tweak, whatever? I want to be mindful of your time, Dom. So But I want to know, you talked about you, like, what other, do you do side work? Is it like, what does work life look like for you now?
It's a weird one, right? So I have a full-time job at Atlassian, work futurists, great. Yeah, I spend a lot of time on stage, conferences and events and stuff, a lot of time with media, with different customers and businesses. And then I spend an amount of time internally. I have a belief that I can't do my job externally if I'm not practicing what I preach internally as well. Otherwise, I run out of stories. So they're the three composites to the role. But I get a lot of latitude, right? I've got a good amount of human capital. I've got, a couple of great bosses as co-founders, Scott and Mike. So like a silly example, we get 5 days foundation leave a year to do charity work. And January last year, I just put out a post on LinkedIn. I was like, I'm going to use my 5 days foundation leave. I'm going to do 20 charity events. So I normally charge a fee for my external speaking. I'm like, I'm going to do it free for charities. And I did about 500 grand's worth of what would have been paid work, but I did that for free for charities. I'm like, you know what? I know what I want on my headstone, right? It's that I've left behind a legacy. And so the 20 different not-for-profits I've worked with this year have all been phenomenal in their own right, but I leave that with wind in my sails, mate. There is not money in the pocket, right? It's not going to pay my electricity bill, but I'm like, damn, I've just impacted a charity that I did a whole lot of work with the homelessness. I did a whole lot of work with charities that give access to education and reading material to girls in Southeast Asia. There's one I work with locally in Australia that is looking after food waste and trying to feed those that don't get ready access to meals, which I know is also a big issue in the UK for people and impacting more and more classes of people that we would have thought were fine. And so I'm like, you know what? If there's little things I can do along the way, someone asked me a while back, and I get asked this every now and then, like, how do I measure my success? I know what my measures in work are, but like, what's mine? And it's, we talked before about activation and impact. I say when I do events with people, I'm like, don't tell me you enjoyed the event. I assume you did. But in 3 or 6 months, if you do something different and you have a behavior change and it positively impacts you, let me know. And that's the bit that every now and then I wake up in the morning and LinkedIn opens up and someone's like, here's the impact you had on my life and how I made a step change and did something different, whether it's new career or got better where I was because I ponied up to it or whatever. I don't care what it is. Those positive stories, they fill the tank, right? That's the reason I do what I do. So whilst I get to go out there, I see it as a huge privilege that I get to share stories with so many people. And therefore, I take that privilege very importantly, that part of my job is to help them just lead a life that's 1 degree better than it was when we started, right? And it's not 10 degrees or 20, it's like just 1 degree improvement, right? And if we do lots of little 1 degrees, we'll be amazed what we can achieve. Nice.
So where can people follow you? Where can they stay up to date? Where can they stay up to what you're thinking and stuff like that? Where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own website, domprice.me. They can check out. There's a whole lot of stuff on there. Or LinkedIn is a place where I'm regularly hanging out, causing trouble, sharing my views on things where I think people are speaking BS and challenging some thought leaders out there. So they're the 2 easiest ways to find me.
Nice. Right at the start, I asked you what do you want to be when you grow up, and as you've clearly demonstrated, we never truly stop growing up.
Yeah.
So if I was to ask you now, Dom, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you say?
I don't want to grow up, and I want to be a really good dad.
Nice.
And those two, I think, have to go hand in hand together. I think, like, I had an hour this afternoon playing with the kids where I just got on the rug and we rolled around and play fighting and fun. And I'm like, that's a very different role for me now, but they both involve legacy, right? In work, I get to get a legacy by feedback and response. And with my kids, I want a similarly powerful legacy, but I don't think growing up is part of that. I think play and playfulness, like we've both talked about, that's my secret sauce there, not growing up. I'll grow old, but I'm not going to grow up.
Nice. Dom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Mate, anything, we could have talked for hours. We'll do another episode next year.
Yes, sounds good to me. Take it easy, Dom.
Thank you.